The Prime Minister to speak about cost of living at the National Press Club this hour, including the government's new tax reforms. Cyclone Kirby is intensifying and already impacting the North Queensland coast.
We're prepared and ready for the worst. Now we wait and hope for the best.
A fourth person dies in Victoria's worst beach tragedy in nearly 20 years.
Oh, he's done it.
And world number 2, Carlos Alcaraz, spectacularly exits the Australian Open as 6th seed Alexander Zverev books his place in the semi-finals. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Ruby Cornish. The federal government is starting its campaign to convince Australians that it's done the right thing by halving the Stage 3 tax cuts for the highest earners. The change will deliver more tax relief to what the Prime Minister has dubbed Middle Australia. Our political reporter Nicole Hegarty joins us now from Parliament House. Nicole, can you take us through what the tax cuts mean for people?
Hi Ruby. So what it means is that all 13.6 million taxpayers will see a tax cut compared with the previous iteration of these changes, which only applied to those earning above $45,000. So going through the different tiers and what they mean here, people earning between $45,000 and $135,000 in any given year will see an extra $804 a year in their accounts. They'll be able to keep that. It'll be in the form of a tax cut, so they won't be having to pay that additional sum of money, which they would have under the previous iteration. Those on $200,000 will still see a cut, but it will be about half of what they had been expecting before. Previously, it was some $9,075. Now it will be reduced to $4,529 a year. Social services groups have welcomed these changes, saying that there was always a case for what they've described as unjust or unequal changes to be amended, but they say they don't go far enough in that there's nothing in this particular package for pensioners and people on other forms of income support.
For people on very low incomes, and that's about 30% of the community, Stage 3 was never going to be providing any help to them. We have more help now for people on modest incomes who are within the income tax system, but let's remember that people on the very lowest incomes are people who are, for example, relying on youth allowance, relying on job seeker. They are facing abject poverty at the moment. They're facing serious deprivation, and as we will always do, we are urging this Parliament to do what it can do. We know it can fix the adequacy of income support.
And Nicole, how's the politics of this playing out so far?
Well, after repeatedly, in fact, more than 100 times committing to keeping these tax cuts both before, during and after the election, there's no surprise here that there's already been attacks on the government for breaking a key election promise. The government, however, is willing to defend this one, arguing that it is appropriate for the economic times that we're in, with those mounting cost of living pressures that are particularly affecting low and middle income earners. They say that it will affect, they believe that it's an okay decision to make and one that they can defend because the majority of taxpayers, some 10.5 million people, will see more money left in their accounts than they would have under the previous changes. So it will be the impact in terms of a reduced tax cut will be isolated to those on higher incomes. Treasurer Jim Chalmers is insisting that this decision was made for the right reason, not for any sort of political decision making here or anything like that, arguing that the benefit will be worthwhile and it's not inflationary and will be revenue neutral. He's been doing the rounds this morning in Canberra selling this message as Labor issues its first of probably what will be a series of campaign videos, this one on the decisions behind this tax. Here's what he had to say.
You build trust by taking the right decisions for the right reasons, even when the politics are difficult. And the opposition, of course, will pay their usual mindless, nasty, negative politics. That's all that they do.
And the shadow opposition leader, the deputy opposition leader rather, Susan Lee, has been speaking this morning, seeking to step back, in fact, some of the comments she made yesterday, where there was a clear indication she was saying that the opposition, if elected, would seek to unwind these changes and revert back to the previous changes as they stood. She's told Radio National this morning that the opposition will now review the detail of these changes before making their position clear. Now, if they were to keep these changes, but also bring back what was to be proposed in terms of higher income earners, the magnitude of the cuts there, so a doubling of what we'll now see, they would need to find an extra $39 billion over the forward estimates. It's not clear if that's exactly what they're planning to do at this time, so we'll wait and see for more detail on that. And also the Prime Minister will be delivering his speech at the National Press Club later this hour, where we will also see some more discussion and information around the Treasury Department's information and briefing on this, their advice as to the inflationary impact and what it will cost to the budget.
And we will be broadcasting that press club address here on the News Channel. Nicole Hegarty, thank you so much for taking us through it. To other news now, and Cyclone Kirby is intensifying as it continues on its path towards North Queensland, where its effects are already being felt. It's just been upgraded to a Category 2 storm and is expected to cross the coast near Townsville early tonight. We'll have more on the storm's movements with weather presenter Nate Byrne shortly. But first, let's go live now to reporter Christy Sexton-McGrath in Townsville. G'day, Christy. What's the latest advice from authorities there?
Yeah, good afternoon, Ruby. I'm on the Townsville Strand, and as you can see, it's just started raining now and the wind's picked up a little bit. I've also just received a text message from the local disaster management group warning of damaging winds from 2 p.m. local time today. The message advises residents to stay off the roads, seek shelter and warn others well ahead of Cyclone Kirby's arrival at around 10 o'clock tonight local time. Now, police have been door-knocking residents in low-lying areas of Townsville, warning them of potential flooding that could come with this system and advising them that they could be isolated for several days. Some residents in areas of Palm Island, now that's one of Australia's largest Indigenous communities just off the coast of Townsville, have now been evacuated. The Townsville airport is due to close in around an hour's time. Schools have been closed all day today, and 2 evacuation centres have now opened in Townsville. I understand there are around 9 residents seeking shelter in those centres. Now, the Queensland Premier Stephen Miles says now is the time to make sure you're ready. Here's what he had to say a short time ago.
If your home is not safe, please make the decision early to get out of it. 9 people have already made that decision and are in our evacuation centres. We have preemptively declared this a disaster. We have preemptively requested assistance from the Australian government and other states, including aerial assets and defence support.
And Christy, you've said there that there are some closures and evacuations happening. Tell us about the other preparations underway as that part of the world prepares for Kirby's arrival.
Yeah, Ruby, look, residents have had plenty of notice about this. We've been talking about this for around a week now. It's just turned into a cyclone, but we've known that this low was coming in for quite a long time. So we've seen residents out sandbagging, stocking up on bottled water and groceries, and also making sure those screws are down nice and tight in their roofs. Authorities are asking residents to keep an eye on those warnings that are being issued very regularly by the Bureau of Meteorology. And of course, Ruby, our local team here, ABC Local Radio, has all the latest on weather information.
Reporter Christy Sexton-McGrath in Townsville, thank you. Let's get more on Cyclone Kirby now with our weather presenter, Nate Byrne. G'day, Nate. How's this system tracking? Have we done a good job of predicting its path so far?
Yeah, actually, it's going pretty much exactly where we thought it was going to go over the last 48 hours. And actually, as we get closer, Ruby, the error bars really start to tighten in. I'll start by showing you the satellite picture. This doesn't look like what you might think of as a tropical cyclone, you know, with that really clear cyclone eye visible from the satellite. But that's because it's not a severe Category 3 tropical cyclone. So not unusual to see a bit of cloud cover over the eye when it's a Category 2. It did intensify a little bit quicker than we were thinking earlier this morning, but as expected, it's likely to continue that strength as it pushes in towards the Queensland coast. This is what the radars looked like. I mean, you can see the showers there that Christy was talking about in Townsville. Now, the winds have already started picking up as well, with those gusts well in excess of 100 kilometres an hour measured over the Whitsundays. 115 is the strongest I saw. We've also seen the winds really starting to deteriorate. Mackay to Bowen, 70, 80 kilometre an hour wind gusts so far. So the latest track from the Bureau still takes the system over Townsville. Now, there is a little bit of variation. We're at the point now where we're getting hourly updates from the Bureau, so they're just tweaking things a little bit. You can see here how narrow that error bar, how narrow those error bars are. It is possible that we'll still see it maybe shifting a little bit northwards, maybe a little bit southwards in the upcoming updates. But a few things are certain. Damaging winds for large parts of the coast, essentially from Innisfail down to Serena, and then inland as far as Charters Towers, we could see gale force winds. Some will see destructive winds. That's wind gusts to 140 kilometres an hour. Now, to the south of the system, the winds are literally going to blow the ocean into the coastline. So that's going to help pick up bigger waves. We could see some low-lying coastal inundation for just those areas right along the shore. And it's going to be very wet as well. The falls have already started, but that's going to intensify as it continues to make its approach. Now looking likely to cross the coast tonight around about 10 p.m. But that's one of these other things that may vary a little bit. It may come a little earlier, maybe a little later. So keep across the warnings. Oh, by the way, we've also got some other heavy falls going on in the southwest. I know you'll indulge me to talk about that very quickly, but let's stay with this system. Once it crosses the coast, it'll weaken pretty quickly to an ex-tropical cyclone. But look at just how long it manages to maintain some of its integrity as it gets all the way into central parts of the territory in the next few days. Now, it's going to carry lots of that rain and some pretty gusty conditions with it. But behind, it is pumping a ton of moisture into the atmosphere, so we are going to see lots of wet and stormy weather even once the cyclone's long gone. It means that the totals are going to be big, and the forecast is essentially matching that track map. We're talking about hundreds of millimetres of rain potentially as it comes. Oh, and my indulgence, this big bit of rain right there. We've also got some heavy rainfall going on in WA at the moment, flash flooding with the potential for some riverine flooding as well. And the reason I want to include this is because this is the other tropical low that we had bothering Darwin. It's now transitioned into a subtropical low, but still causing a headache. The tropics this time of year, Ruby, very, very dangerous.
Oh, it's raining, it's pouring everywhere. But in other extreme weather news, Nate, there's a heat wave forecast for Queensland, South Australia and New South Wales over the next couple of days.
Yeah, poor old Queensland. Hey, it's a cyclone coming in tonight, but then in the southwest of the state, it's already almost 45 degrees in Birdsville. They're aiming for a forecast top of 49 degrees. Speaking to the Bureau this morning, it's not impossible that we could see it get to 50. I mean, you know, it's only, coming up 11:15 in the morning, and those temperatures are already rising there. But this broad area is where we're looking at. Now, there's a little bit of good news in the future, but for now, we've got really broad areas of high fire danger in the east. Also in the west, lots of heat still persisting there. Severe to extreme heat wave conditions continue, but can you see them starting to ease and being carved out? That's because of tropical cyclone Kirby as it comes in. Now over in WA, we've got some extreme fire danger to watch at the moment, but in the east, once Kirby makes landfall and the cloud really spreads, we've still got lots of heat tomorrow, but then beyond that, you can see where it's tracking because it's going to help cool things down. That cloud cover will really protect things. Although tomorrow we've got some extreme fire danger to deal with in New South Wales, up in the north of the state there. After that, we'll see an easing for much of the east in the coming days, Ruby. So a busy lead up to the weekend and certainly a very wet and wild weekend, but hopefully next week things will start to ease off a bit.
Very busy, but I'm so glad that we have you to talk us through it. Nate Byrne, thank you so much. A fourth person has died in Victoria's worst beach tragedy in nearly 20 years. Two women in their 20s and a man in his 40s died after being pulled from the water at an unpatrolled beach off the coast of Phillip Island, southeast of Melbourne. Another woman in her 20s was rescued and flown to the Alfred Hospital in Melbourne in a critical condition. On Thursday, police confirmed she had died too. A memorial statue of Captain Cook has been cut down in Melbourne on the eve of Australia Day. Police say the statue on Jacker Boulevard in St Kilda was sawn off at the ankles at around 3:30 this morning. Several people were seen loitering in the area at the time, but no arrests have yet been made. A second statue of Queen Victoria has been sprayed with red paint at nearby St Kilda Road. Premier Jacinta Allen has condemned the vandalism.
This sort of vandalism really has no place in our community, and we'll be working. I want to signal today that we will be working with council to repair and reinstate the statue, the statue in St Kilda that has been vandalised overnight.
Israel is intensifying its attacks in southern Gaza. The United Nations says Israeli tanks shelled one of its centres where 30,000 displaced Palestinians are sheltering, killing at least 9. Israel has denied responsibility. Global Affairs editor John Lyons has the details.
There's intensifying fighting this morning in the southern part of Gaza Strip, around Khan Yunis in the south there, and the United Nations is saying that there have been mass casualties at a training centre in Khan Yunis. There are about 800 or so people who were taking refuge in that training centre. It has been hit. We don't quite know how many people are dead yet or how many injured. The Israeli army has, with tanks, surrounded much of Khan Yunis, and there's also a lot of bombardment from the air. Now, the Israelis are saying, of course, as they have right throughout this war for the last 3.5 months, that the problem for them is that Hamas has a deliberate strategy of embedding itself in civilian areas to use them essentially, or to use them as human shields, and that to try to pursue and to kill the Hamas fighters and the leaders, they are hitting some of these places where civilians will be killed. There's also 2 hospitals in that area that the periphery of them has been attacked. Now, Israel is saying it has warned the hospitals to evacuate, for the patients to leave, but Doctors Without Borders is saying it's impossible to evacuate because if people are trying to get out of the hospitals, then the serious aerial bombardment is as much of a danger as staying in the hospitals.
Russia has accused Ukraine of killing 65 of its own prisoners of war by deliberately shooting down a Russian military plane. Moscow says the captured soldiers were being flown to an exchange when the plane crashed in the southern Belgorod region near Ukraine. Kyiv said it was not told to secure safe airspace, unlike in previous swaps.
A giant fireball near the Russian city of Belgorod. Good God, this woman says. Footage posted on social media showed a plane falling from the sky.
We saw a red fiery object, then we heard an explosion and saw a red flash, and that was it.
We all ran outside in case there was any help needed. It crashed far away, but it was still loud and scary.
The remnants of a Russian military transport plane could be seen scattered across fields near the Ukrainian border. Moscow immediately accused Ukraine of shooting it down with missiles in a terrorist act and said it had been carrying 65 Ukrainian prisoners of war on their way to an exchange.
Instead of this exchange taking place, the Ukrainian side launched an anti-aircraft missile attack on this plane, which became fatal.
3 Russian officers and 6 crew members were also said to be on board. Ukraine did not confirm or deny involvement. Military intelligence said a swap had been due to take place, but that Kyiv was not told to secure its airspace for the transfer.
It's evident the Russians are playing with the lives of Ukrainian prisoners, with the feelings of their families. It's necessary to establish all clear facts, considering the plane crashed on Russian territory.
The Ukrainians are claiming one thing, the Russians are claiming another, and we just don't know enough to comment on it.
In a church near the crash site, a vigil for the Russian servicemen on board. It's unlikely Russia will allow an independent investigation, so the true circumstances of the incident may never be known. Elias Kluwer, ABC News.
Donald Trump's supporters are calling on Nikki Haley to drop out of the race for the Republican presidential nomination. It follows the former president's win in yesterday's primary in New Hampshire. North America correspondent Jade McMillan has the latest.
Donald Trump is in an incredibly dominant position despite all of the legal problems that he is facing, having been charged with 91 offences in 4 separate cases. He has now decisively won the first 2 stages of this race in Iowa and then New Hampshire, and he's only got one serious challenger left. That is Nikki Haley, his former United Nations ambassador. She came in second behind the former president yesterday, beaten by around 11 points. But she insists that the United States does not do coronations, in her words. There have only been 2 states voting so far, and she argues that others deserve to have their say. So she is saying that she will be staying on, and she has continued her campaign today. She faces a really difficult task ahead though, and there are growing calls from within her party for her to withdraw altogether. The chair of the Republican National Committee, despite having previously pledged to stay neutral as this contest played out, has said that the party really should unite behind Donald Trump, and some of the former president's backers have publicly called on Nikki Haley to drop out. They include Republican Senator Tim Scott. He was a candidate himself at one point, but withdrew and threw his support behind Donald Trump.
Well, the results speak for themselves. It wasn't just simply Iowa or New Hampshire. The numbers in South Carolina are even worse for Nikki. The bottom line is simply this: we should start focusing our attention on the contrast between 4 years of Joe Biden versus 4 years of Donald Trump.
The next competitive contest potentially is South Carolina next month. That is Nikki Haley's home state. It is where she was governor, and she is really throwing everything at it at this point in time. She's holding an event there today, and she's also launched a new advertising campaign. But polls suggest that Donald Trump, even with Nikki Haley's homegrown advantage, still holds a commanding lead. Now, her supporters argue that regardless of Donald Trump's wins so far, that Nikki Haley is outperforming him when it comes to more moderate voters and independents, and they say that that would make her a stronger threat against Joe Biden at the general election. Here's New Hampshire's Governor Chris Sununu.
What was proven last night is that Trump is going to have a huge problem in November. Guys, this is all about the general election. We need winners. I want to win Senate seats and House seats and governorships. I want my candidate for president to win by double digits so we carry momentum in, not have some sort of nail biter.
Now, President Joe Biden is also looking ahead to the general election in November. He won the Democratic primary in New Hampshire yesterday, although there was a dispute there over the timing of that vote. So those results don't officially count. It was more of a symbolic victory. But he has said that he is expecting Donald Trump to be the Republican nominee, and he has said the stakes at that election for Americans could not be higher.
Jade McMillan reporting there, and David Chow is here now with your business news.
The Australian share market has risen for its 5th day in a row, thanks to solid gains from healthcare and resource stocks in particular. So the All Ords and ASX 200 so far have risen by a pretty respectable 0.3%. And the best performing stocks include Mineral Resources, ResMed and BlueScope Steel. But the worst performer by far is Domino's Pizza, which is experiencing its worst trading day so far, with its share price plunging nearly 30%. And that's after the pizza chain scrapped its earnings guidance and said sales in some of its key overseas markets have been worse than expected. Domino's says sales growth was strong in Australia, New Zealand and Germany, but sales at its stores in Asia, particularly in nations like Japan, Taiwan and Malaysia, were down 9% in the first half of the financial year. The company says its half-year profit before tax is expected to land between $87 to $90 million, which is a big downgrade compared to $105 million a year ago. And this has led to a number of major investment firms slapping a sell or underperform rating on Domino's shares. Now, on Wall Street, it was a bit of a mixed bag. The Dow Jones slipped by 0.3%. The Nasdaq Composite went up slightly by 0.4%, while the S&P 500 made tiny gains, but that was enough to push it to a fresh record high. Now, much of this optimism on Wall Street is being driven by tech-related companies like Netflix, which saw its share price surge by around 10% after announcing it attracted 13 million extra subscribers in the December quarter. So it does look like Netflix's password-sharing crackdown and offering a lower-priced subscription with ads is working. Also doing well are companies which make microchips like Nvidia and those which dabble in artificial intelligence like Microsoft and Facebook, as investors are trying to bet on the next big thing. Now, in commodity markets, gold has lifted to $2,015 an ounce. Oil prices are a bit higher, Brent crude above $80 a barrel once again. And finally, the Aussie dollar has slipped a little. It's buying 65.7 US cents.
The Australian Open moves into semi-final mode today as the top 4 women compete for a place in the final. Paul Kennedy joins us from Melbourne Park. G'day, Paul. Who's in contention?
Hey, Ruby. Yes, a quiet day here, by the way, at Melbourne Park. I know Catherine Murphy's been giving updates so far. It's like a big party until now, and everyone just takes a deep breath because there's no big games, singles matches on centre court. Last couple of days, big quarterfinals, and last night the semi-finalists were set. So who's in contention? Qinwen Zhang has won through to the semi-finals from China. She is the first Chinese semi-finalist at the Australian Open since Li Na 10 years ago. Interestingly, Li Na is on court now in a Legends match. She's giving the 21-year-old some tips along the way. But Qinwen won through in 3 sets, lost the first set, and then came back against Anna Kalinskaya from Russia, the 25-year-old. So she's through, and now she'll go straight in tonight and play a semi-final against Diana Yastremska from the Ukraine, who won through yesterday in 3 sets, and now she's had an interesting time of it too, coming through as a qualifier, the first qualifier to make the semi-finals in the female draw since 1978. So that's in one semi-final tonight, Qinwen versus the Ukrainian. And then we've got Coco Gauff and Aryna Sabalenka. That is a big match. I mean, they're all big matches at semi-finals time, but Sabalenka and Gauff played off for the final of the US Open last year. Sabalenka wants revenge. She's talking revenge, and Coco Gauff wants to get through to another final and try and win another big slam as she tries to establish herself just before her 20th birthday. It's her 5th Australian Open, and she's still only 19 years old.
Oh, we love a grudge match. And a big match last night between 2 men. Who were they and who came out on top?
Yeah, Alex Zverev has won through to the semi-finals, beating Carlos Alcaraz. Now, Alcaraz has won 2 slams. He was probably favoured. He looked like he'd been building through the whole tournament for this one. But Zverev came out in hot form, took the first 2 sets, served for the match in the 3rd set, didn't get it done there, but won in 4 sets. So Zverev goes through to play Daniil Medvedev from Russia, and that's going to be one semi-final. And in the other semi-final, of course, Novak Djokovic is really firming. I mean, Alcaraz is seen as a real challenger to him. He's out now, so Djokovic is firming, and he's up against Jannik Sinner, the Italian, who's also been impressive. So in the women's side, we've got a qualifier, an unseeded player, and a couple of stars. And in the blokes side, it's all players in the top 10. So they will be tomorrow night in the semi-finals. The women's semi-finals coming up today after a bunch of doubles matches, including a couple of Australians today. Matt Ebden is out there and Storm Hunter in the doubles.
Paul Kennedy at Melbourne Park, thanks for the update. A quick look now at the national weather forecast. In Brisbane, mostly sunny. Sydney will be cloudy. In Canberra, partly cloudy. Melbourne, a possible shower. Hobart, partly cloudy. Adelaide, showers increasing through the day. Sunny in Perth. And Darwin, rain with a possible storm. And that is ABC News for now. I'm Ruby Cornish. Thank you for your company. Stay with us for the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, who's speaking at the National Press Club.